After the last podcast, it occurred to me that perhaps I may be giving some people the impression that I'm a one trick pony and I'm only for the use of the phone when it comes to dealing with your customers. So, just in case I haven't set the emphasis right, I would like to do so right now. I believe in a multi channel approach, and so I think you should be using all means of communications at your disposal. Visiting people face to face, making phone calls, sending WhatsApp, Telegram, text messaging, emails, Zoom, the the video feature on the iPhone. I can't remember what that is called. I believe that you should use everything at your disposal to get to the desired end, which is to secure the business of that bride and groom that is before us right now, and also use that to facilitate a pleasant relationship afterwards so that we can get repeat business and referrals from the bride and members of her family, her colleagues, associates, on and on and on. So I'm all for a multi-channel approach. It doesn't have to be the phone all the time. However, since our line of business, for those of us in the wedding and event space, since it's it's more personable than other things, because I also do a little bit of business on the side with my brother and another partner, exporting agricultural products. So the commodities business is not as well, yes, you deal with people, but the emphasis on personal relationships is not as much as when we're dealing with a bride who is planning the wedding, or the groom who wants to have a pleasant, how will I put it? A pleasant soiree so that he and his friends can chill out for the day. But I mean, basically, what I'm trying to say is that when we are working with brides and grooms and people trying to set up an event, there are more personal things, there are more personal feelings involved, and there's much more emotion invested in the whole process rather than when we're dealing with commodities. For instance, let's say you're trying to sell cashew that you've just harvested from the farm, or cassava. So with that in mind, since we are dealing with more in your face, personal type, emotional situations, it would only make sense that you would look for those mediums which make it easier to foster those kinds of connections. So that's the reason why I always speak about these sorts of things in a hierarchy. So even though you should use all the tools that are available to you, I believe that the hierarchy is: number one, face to face; number two, phone; three, video; number four, text based means like email, text messaging. And when it comes to the text based mediums, I actually think that WhatsApp, SMS, Telegram, those sorts of things, I think take priority over email, at least when it comes to trying to foster a personal relationship, and then on and on and on, and you stretch them out. Maybe in a few decades, we might start having these conversations again and having to see where virtual reality falls into the mix. But for now, I think that is the hierarchy. So no, I'm not a one trick pony. I'm not saying that the phone solves the problem for everything. I just believe it's right up there in the hierarchy. But face to face, number one, and I think phone, number two. Maybe now phone might be number one, since lots of people might not be keen on doing the face to face right now with the corona situation. Okay, so that's it out of the way. Hopefully, I've clarified my stance. The phone is not a solution to everything, but it's going to help, particularly in this kind of industry that we are involved in. It's going to help a lot if you move it right up the pole, if you move it right up the hierarchy of the tools that you have, and take it in that order. So face to face is not available, move to the phone. If you can't, text based, and then on and on until you get to the end, whatever the end is. I'm assuming that maybe the regular mail, snail mail, night post, maybe that's the bottom of the ladder. Okay, now I promised you guys that we're going to explore some lessons, things that we can glean about how the protests were handled and how we can see how principles of persuasion, sales, influence, and communication could have led to different outcomes. Now, the episode that I want to explore for now is the governor of Lagos State and how he handled things from the evening, the Lekki protest, where supposedly some people were shot and some lives were lost. In his immediate address to the people of Lagos State, some people say that that is the main reason that sparked the carnage that followed. That's the looting, the burning, the attack on policemen and fire service, and on and on and on. Some people say that his speech was the key thing that precipitated all that chaos. Well, I beg to differ. I think, well, I went to Obafemi Awolowo University, and for those of you who know Nigerian schools, you know that our school had, I don't know about now, but back when I was in school and before, we had a history of these sorts of things, blow-ups with the school authorities, with the police, with the military, and let's just say it was a big part of our history. So for those of us who went to OAU, Obafemi Awolowo University, and some of my classmates, especially our seniors who had it pretty rough when cultism was thrown in the mix, we know that when you have these protests going on and emotions are really riling high, it's only a matter of time before things explode. So I doubt that the governor's protest was the key thing that precipitated all that madness. But for now, let's work on the assumption that it was his address that did. Okay, so this is how I think a sales approach to the whole problem might have. Please, I'm just restricting it not to the whole end SARS protest in general, but just that final Lekki bit that led up to the carnage that followed in Lagos. Okay, so on one end, you have the governor. On the other end, you have protesters who are aggrieved. Whether we agree with the cause of their pain or not, you have people that are aggrieved, people who claim that they have been shot at and that they have dead bodies to show. So, if the governor of Lagos State had someone on his cabinet who had a communications background, who has a sales background, who had a persuasion background, a background in all these soft skills, he probably would have advised his oga. For my non-Nigerian listeners, that is the boss. So he probably would have advised his boss that, hey, Mr. Boss Man, I know that from the stats we have here, we don't think anybody has died, and we can't verify that the shooting was indeed done by the military. But however, Mr. Bossman, it might not be wise to go on camera saying those sorts of things immediately, so soon after the shooting, because that kind of talk might be incendiary and it might get people really angry and heated. And as it is, tensions are already high since we have these people here who say that some of their members were shot, and we have videos of them dying right on camera. So, Mr. Bossman, how about we tweak it this way? Instead of going ahead with this message, which was the kind of message that he eventually delivered, which was that the military didn't shoot, he has no control over the military, there's nothing in his power he could have done to avert that, and that, to the best of their knowledge, after speaking with hospital staff and administration, that there were no dead bodies. That's what he actually said, and people claim that that's what made folks to go absolutely bonkers the next day and turned the protest into a full-scale riot. So the way that they could have tweaked the messaging is, if there was a sales professional in the room, at least someone who has classical sales training, it would have realized that when you're dealing with someone and the person has an objection, both of you are butting heads, the first thing that you do is not to play up the conflict, but you affirm the other person. Because when people feel like they are heard and listened to, they get calm. So if you affirm the other person, the person calms down, you're able to build some commonality, some rapport, you get a conversation going. You might be able to douse tensions for a while, and eventually you might be able to peacefully lead them towards the destination that you were working towards, which in the case of Lagos State government was that we can't verify that there were soldiers who shot, and from the figures that we have, we know that nobody was killed. Oh, by the way, that's not my opinion. I'm not saying this as fact, because this is a highly disputed matter. I'm just saying that this is the message that the Lagos State government, through the governor, was trying to pass across after the riots. So it would have been better to have said something like this. And by the way, as usual, I'm just freestyling. Perhaps if I had thought about it ahead of time, I could have come up with a much more elegantly crafted communications response. But basically, I think it would have been better to, number one, affirm the crowd. So that could have been anything from talking about how tragic the day's events were and how the government and the people of Lagos State stand firmly behind the protesters and their enshrined rights to protest, and how deplorable it is that anyone would try to infringe on that right in such a violent matter, especially since the whole protest was about decrying violence in the first place. And then you acknowledge the reports that they have been receiving about the possible number of casualties, and that the state government is open to making sure that if any cases of homicide are able to be established, that whoever the perpetrators were will be brought fully to justice. And so because of that, the Lagos State government has opened up a hotline, or has opened up this website, or has opened up this commission, so that those people who have footage, the videos that were on Instagram or whatever, people who have footage, recording, things like that, can send these things to the hotline, to the website, to the commission, to aid in the investigation of ascertaining whether people were in fact killed and how many people were killed. Well, there's a limit to how much I can stretch this with my imagination. But basically, that sort of approach would have gotten people not so riled up. It wouldn't have gotten people so riled up, and maybe the outcome of events the next day would have been different. I mean, basically, the lesson here for the sales practitioners, the lesson that the sales practitioner would have brought to this would have been, when you're with a bunch of people who are angry and who say that several of their members have been shot and killed, you don't just stand up and say, oh no, on the contrary, I've spoken to the medical professionals, nobody was shot. And that is, butting heads is not going to help you make the sale at the end of the day. And I think the sale that the Lagos State government was working towards was, everybody be calm, let's see how we can get this thing under control, and let's make sure that violence and the violence doesn't escalate, and let's prevent further loss of lives and property. I'm assuming that was the sale. So if that was the line that the Lagos State government was trying to sell, then the first thing that they needed to do was to show some empathy, to validate not to validate what went on that day, but affirm the feelings of the aggrieved, and taking it from there and try to establish commonality and established rapport. And hopefully that sort of approach would have made things a whole lot better. And taking things away from a larger scale, from Lagos State, and looking towards the nation at large, perhaps the outcome of the NSAS protests would have turned out differently if the protesters, in whatever state that they were, whether in Abuja or Lagos, I hear there was also some agitation in Minna, Niger State, and also in some places in the east, if they felt a conciliatory conciliatory attitude from not just members of the public at large, but from members of the government and people who are in charge of determining policy. Perhaps if they felt listened to and affirmed, maybe things could have been a whole lot different. For now, it looks like things are calming down, and looks like we might be getting a bit of order restored in the states that had hot flashes of violence. And we thank God for that. We're grateful for that. Please keep remembering to pray for Nigeria, for those of you who are my foreign listeners, because definitely those of us who are over here in the country are praying, because it's our country. We know no other country, and we don't want to see the shit hit the fan, because there's no other place that we call home. So, well, I guess that's just the summary. And like I said in the first episode where I started talking about these sorts of things, in the future, a couple of us are going to be involved in government. A couple of us are going to be involved in situations where we determine public policy, and we determine the response to crisis situations and things of that nature. It's not just for my listeners this doesn't just apply to my listeners in Nigeria, but my listeners abroad as well. We're going to do very good in business, and so in a couple of years, we're going to move on up, and we're going to be relevant people in society. And so these things that we discuss here on the podcast and that we learn in business are going to come in handy, not just for bringing in our naira and kobo and bringing in the pounds and the dollars, but is also going to help when we become distinguished members of Senate, ministers, presidents, governors, public advocates, whatever it is that we're going to do. All these trainings are going to come in handy. And so let us remember that no matter what it is that we're involved in, everything is a sale. Right now, the sales that we're involved in is we're trying to sell our services: wedding photography, wedding planning, the cake, the pyrotechnics, the MC, the drinks. We're trying to sell that to the bride and trying to sell that to the groom. When we are involved in government and in public policy, we'll be trying to sell an agenda to our people. So for those of you in America right now, depending on who you talk to, the agenda you're trying to sell is global warming, or coronavirus is real, or let's see, what else? Or if you happen to be in Europe, the agenda that you're trying to sell is probably around immigration and fiscal issues. And right now, in Nigeria, what we're trying to sell are security issues and social justice issues and those sorts of things. The bottom line is, it's all a sale. It will always be a sale. We're trying to get people to understand the point of view and to get them to take a course of action towards what it is that we think is the rightful end and the rightful goal. So let's remember, we will always be salespeople. We may have started out right now as wedding professionals, but I doubt that that is what we are all going to remain for the rest of our lives. So let's remember to take these little nuggets, these gifts, these little pearls of wisdom that we can gain from being salespeople, and carry them into other areas of our lives, not just personal, but also in the public space as well. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I'm your host, Abuja-based photographer Tavishima Ayede. Comments, questions, or inquiries, hit me up on email, ayede.taver@gmail.com, and I'm also on Twitter at ayedetaver. No dot, no hashtag, no underscore, no space. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I'll catch you at the next episode.